When she kisses him, he remembers. It's as if his past lives come flooding back to him, much like when we remember who we are by knowing all is love. Welcome to another episode of TrueLove Talks. Today I want to talk about all is mind, because it seems like obviously there are a lot of people who don't understand what this means, and it's very difficult, I understand that, to grasp the concept that this world is not physical and that it is metaphysical, but it's also in the mind, it's a tricky one. However, it also seems that if I say that something is self-created or in the mind, that this is conflated with that you're making it all up, which in a way you are, or that it's not real, in a way it's not, or that you're crazy, which you're not. This is often the feeling that a lot of people have once they find out certain truths about this place. This can lead to schizophrenia, this can lead to psychosis, depression, anxiety, all sorts of other mental illnesses if you don't know how this world works and you don't understand the power of the mind and you don't understand what's going on. And I think dementia plays into this as well, from what I am gathering. I think dementia is losing perspective on this place just being physical and starting to see through the veil, much like schizophrenia, but you don't understand what you're seeing, and so people think that you're losing your mind, in which in some cases you're losing hold of the ego mind, because you're seeing things that aren't really there, or things that are there that other people can't see. So let me backtrack for a second. This place, the way I describe this place, and I'm not alone in this, is that it is a dream within a dream. It's a consciousness creation. It is a co-created experience. We are inside the mind of God. We are individual and connected. If you are the dreamer, it's as if the people that you are dreaming about become conscious within your dream and start having dreams of their own. That's what we're experiencing here. There's so much I want to say. Okay, so we are inside the mind of God. We are created by the mind of God. All of these stories are stories we created to explain who we are and why we're here in the physical. And you, being an aspect of one element of this universe is the one song, is the Taurus, the story, the fairy tale, the pharaoh tarot, the story of God. And each one of us plays a role within that story. There is only one story, and that story is 911, IXXI. It is the story of emergency, a story of your awakening. God fell asleep, has planted in the story reminders so that God could wake up again and remember who he or she really is. So that is why everything here is about IXXI, 911, the emergency, the trauma center. The trauma is here to wake you up, to make you realize that this world is not what you think it is. It's an illusion. And all of this is created in the mind because God wanted to forget who he is so he could see what it was like to not be himself, or she not be herself, and experience life. We are a figment of God's imagination, and within this story, this Taurus, we are an element of this story, which is why we have an archetype, which is the essence of who we really are. And I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that I am, because I think the essence of who we really are is what we are inside and outside of this reality. Because the outside story that surrounds us, that fulfills this archetypal story of our life, is constant. No matter which parallel universe that you are existing in, you will play the same story from different angles. And it does seem as though things are just happening to you because you're not aware of your, let's say, genetic makeup, of the essence of who you really are, because everything around you is here to tell you who you are. And because you forgot, you think these things are happening outside of you. You think they have nothing to do with you, but they are directly connected to you. This is why I disagree with the notion that we should ignore the physical. In order to understand what is happening outside of ourselves, we must look within. It's not as within, not without. It's as within, so without. Reading the codes around us and understanding who we really are is important because we're here for a reason. And some people have asked as well, if this is just a dream, then none of it has any meaning and none of this matters. And if it was all random chaos and had no meaning to it and wasn't connected and wasn't all the same story and wasn't reflective of who you really are, and there was no interconnection to a single story with a single theme, and all of that wasn't tied to your awakening, I would agree. But because there is meaning, I disagree. This dream has meaning, and it has meaning because it's here to wake you up. And that's so we can return home. So anyway, let me backtrack. Me saying that it's all in the mind, it's self-created, doesn't mean you're crazy, doesn't mean you're making it up, doesn't mean that it isn't happening. It means it's self-created. And some of it, yes, is in your head, as in it's not happening. It just appears to be happening. When an experience is self-created, it really happens in real life, but you manifested it. But when an experience is only in your mind, then you might be experiencing psychosis, or you might suffer from delusions, paranoia, or have a tendency toward distorting reality to suit your perspective. When we manifest an experience, be it good or bad, we can inspire others to participate in our manifestations. The events that come together to create the experience are simply a result of synchronicities. Because it is a synchronicity, that's all it is. Your consciousness is syncing up moments to show back to you what you are thinking. So unfortunately, a lot of people, because of society and the way that society thinks, society would label this as psychosis or schizophrenia, which it isn't. It's seeing the synchronicities. And I talk about this to let you know that this is what's happening so you can get out of it. You have to understand the power of the mind. You can create positive experiences just as much as fearful ones. But if you look at this world like a dream, and within a dream, you manifest things out of how you feel or things that you're thinking about, and it reflects back to you what's going on in your mind. So if you interpret your dream, then you can figure out things that your subconscious is trying to work out, which is what your reality is reflecting back to you. So if something in your experience is happening that you don't like, it's there for you to examine and say, okay, I don't really like what's going on here. How do I change this? And it's something that you got to look within to adjust. Asking somebody outside of yourself to change their behavior, I mean, on one hand, perhaps that's what you need to do. Perhaps you need to state that I don't like your behavior, and then if they don't change their behavior, which chances are most people won't, then you need to leave. You need to end the relationship because it's not working for you. But that behavior is happening for a reason. And if it bothers you, then it bothers you for a reason. So we have to look within ourselves to find out what it is about it that bothers us. Usually it's something that we need to give ourselves. So give that thing to yourself, and either the thing that bothers you will vanish, or you'll get rid of it because you won't have any need for it anymore. It's very easy to forget that this world is not physical. It's easy to forget that what happens outside of ourselves is a reflection of what's within ourselves. Let's say you know someone who constantly says things like, I'm broke, I can't afford that, I don't have enough, these types of expressions. And then you talk to them and their car breaks down, and then their computer breaks down, and there's constantly one thing after another breaking down because this person is so focused on being broke. It's manifesting in different forms in their life. And the average person who doesn't understand that all is mind, doesn't understand that there's a connection between mind and the external, will say, oh, well, that's just how it really is. They say they're broke because they're broke. That's true, but the reverse is also true. They're broke because they're focused on being broke. So if you are focused on lack, focused on poverty, focused on being broke, you're going to get more poverty, more broke, It's what's going to persist in your experience until you change it. And you are pointing at things in the physical that prove to you that this is happening to you. You're only going to solidify and perpetuate this happening to you. Now, you can also plant ideas in people's heads, such as when I was in the store and these people were singing the lyrics to the song. It was because I had this idea that people were following me, so people started following me and singing the song that was on the radio. I'll tell you a story about how I planted thoughts in people's heads. I was on vacation and I was practicing law of attraction, having fun with it, and I went into the restaurant and had a very conscious thought, it would be nice if, which I like that phrase, it would be nice if, because there's no attachment to it. It would be nice if, and it's not like a wish or anything, it's just it would be nice if. It would be nice if someone brought me a glass of wine. And I sat down and I wasn't even sitting for like a minute when a waiter came over and said, would you like red or white? And I had a little chuckle and I said, I'd like red, please. I'll tell you another example. I went on vacation another time and I was having trouble with a boyfriend at the time, and he was looking for a Christian, and I wasn't Christian enough for him because I wasn't religious. So that was in my head. But I was actively practicing law of attraction, and when I arrived at the hotel, there was a mix-up with my booking. I was the only one on the trip who had a mix-up with the booking, so I had to go to the desk with the tour guide whose name was Christian. So I get to the front desk and I'm talking to this guy, and I find out that he is really into law of attraction. So we started talking and we formed a friendship, and we had breakfast a few times together while I was there and hung out a few times, and we had a nice time, and we even kept in touch after I left for quite some time, several years actually. We would talk for hours about law of attraction. He talked to me about Neville Goddard. I think he introduced me to him. Anybody who is not familiar with the concept that all is mind, look into law of attraction, practice law of attraction, and you will see it. Try Neville Goddard, Wayne Dyer, Abraham Hicks, whatever suits your fancy. Neville Goddard Reader is a good book to start with. And the Kabbalion. Obviously, if you have other suggestions, please leave it in the comments below. There's plenty of resources on this. Another example, I thought I want to manifest something that I know for certain that I manifest. And this is a really good exercise for anybody who doesn't believe that all is mind, who has no experience with it, can't see it. You have to try these exercises and be open-minded about it, because if you're not open-minded about it, that's what you're going to get reflected back to you. So one of the first things I tried was I wanted to see something I knew that I manifested, something that was unusual and clear. And so I thought of purple roses. I thought, I haven't seen purple roses. I know that when I see purple roses, I know that that's something that I manifested. And so a couple weeks go by and nothing happened, and I totally forgot about it until one morning I was sitting in my parents' place on the patio, and there on the table was a little pot of purple roses. And my mom said that she just liked them and brought them home, but they had brought home a whole lot of different plants. But that was the only one she didn't plant in the garden. And she said she didn't know where she wanted to put them yet. And the reason those were the only ones that she hadn't planted was because they had to be put front and center in front of my face so that I would see them. Because I had planted the thought in my mom's head, she was receptive to it, and she acted on it. And this is why, if you don't control your mind, someone else will control it for you. And it's not necessarily a negative thing unless you're doing things you don't want to do. But if you're open and vulnerable and receptive to other people's thoughts, you will find yourself doing things that you don't particularly want to do, or you will find yourself doing things that you think that you want to do, but you actually were compelled by somebody else casting spells with their wishes and their desires that they've put out there with their words. I mean, you must understand that the world was created from sound. The world was created with words. Words are verbs. Verbs are reverberation. Sound creates light. Words cast spells. Spelling is casting a spell. We live in a magical realm. Everything is created from thought. Thought with focused energy and attention creates words, creates sound, creates light, manifests things into the physical world. Oh, I had another experience where, okay, so I was going to meet the girls. We're going out to a bar, and I dressed up, and I said to myself, I said, there's going to be a guy in the bar, and he's going to see me across the room, and he's going to come over and talk to me. So I walked in the room, I walked in the bar, and my girlfriends weren't there yet, and I looked around the bar for a place to sit, and there was a booth available, so I went and took the booth. And I walked across the room, and I could feel that there was somebody watching me. And I sat down, and I looked over, and this guy was sitting at the bar. He looked over at me, he got up, crossed the room, and sat next to me and talked to me for hours. And I was like, that was really weird. I had a couple of experiences like that. Here's a story of manifestation that I did before I knew anything about law of attraction. I was a big fan of the band Oasis, and when I lived in London, I lived within walking distance of Liam Gallagher's house, and so this was the late 90s, and they were still a pretty huge band at the time. I used to walk past his house quite a bit because I used to go to Primrose Hill and sit there and read. I knew where he lived, and I would think that one day I'm going to see him outside of his house. Well, I would walk past his house and no, nothing. But there was one day where I just knew. I knew I was going to see him. And as I was approaching his house, on the wall outside of another house was an empty bottle with Oasis on the label. There's a drink called Oasis. And I thought, oh, that's a sign I'm going to see him today. Well, I rounded the corner, and there was Liam Gallagher sitting on his front stoop talking to a fan. And I walked by, and I thought, oh, should I say something? Should I say something? I had nothing to say. But he looked at me, we made eye contact, and I was pretty happy with that. And then I heard him say something about have to go make lemonade in the backyard, and he went inside and said goodbye to his fan. So I saw him. So that was pretty cool. Because again, I like to play with this sort of stuff. So I wanted to manifest an experience where I was contacted by an A-list celebrity. And again, I guess a week or so went by, nothing happened. And at the time I was kind of goofing around on Twitter and leaving like silly comments. I'd like joke with people, and so I guess I caught the attention of one of these A-list screenwriters, and I told you the story about meeting this person. And so we started interacting on Twitter, and I was just like, okay, is this really happening? This is really weird. So yeah, that was pretty funny. And yeah, I ended up going to meet him, and nice guy. So that was kind of interesting. Another time, longer manifestations, not just like little thingies. I had a bit of a Cinderella story where I was working at this office that I was undervalued, underpaid, and I was talked down to and treated like I was a 20-year-old when I was not. And I was not happy about it. I wasn't happy about how I was being treated. I wasn't happy about my boss. My boss was a bit of a narcissist. She wouldn't do anything, and she took credit for everybody else's work. And then I was overworked, and I was stressed out, and nobody seemed to care. And so I was frustrated. And then my boss tried to give me additional work, and it was work that I didn't think was within my job description. I believed that it fell under the sales category, and I'm not good at sales. I am not a salesperson. I hate sales. It makes me uncomfortable, and so I didn't want to do it, and I said no. Well, you don't say no to a narcissist. She flew off the handle and yelled at me, and I stormed out and left and was contemplating not coming back. And so I went to a parking lot where it was empty and screamed and cried and trying to figure out what to do, because I was like, why is this happening? What am I doing here? I hate this. This is just awful. And so I calmed down, and I said, like, I was going to quit. I'm like, it's not worth it. I don't want to be treated this way. I don't want to be here. And And then I thought, okay, well, I can't quit. I'm only here for a maternity cover, so it's a short period of time. I can deal with this. I can do this. So what am I going to do to make it better? How do I make it better? So I focused on the kind of job that I wanted, the kind of job I enjoyed doing, and I focused on how I wanted to feel and how I wanted them to see me. I did not change how I thought about her, but I did totally ignore it. I totally focused on me instead. I focused on what I wanted, how I wanted to be treated, and I focused on that. I said I was going to be the best employee they've ever had. They were going to love me. They were going to love my work. And I was only going to do the work that I wanted to do. So every day I went into work, I talked to myself in my car about the kind of day that I was going to have. And I pretended that I was working at a film production studio. So I would talk about how my colleagues would come and talk to me in the break room, and we would talk about movies, and we would talk about the films that we were working on and the projects we were working on, and it was always fun and light, and we had a really great collaborative environment. Everybody was supportive, and so I had created this image of what the day was going to be like before I went in. Every day I did this, and it ended up being that way. I remember distinctly going into the break room, and the conversation that I had with myself in the car played out almost exactly the same way as it did in the break room. I had my colleagues came in, we started talking about film and television as if we were working on these projects, and I was like, what? Anyway, I ended up doing only what I wanted to do. I did amazing creative projects. I had all the work that I didn't want to do magically got done by somebody else. I didn't even have to ask, it just happened. At the end of it all, everybody loved me, and I won an award for my work, and it ended up on a high, which was great. And I ended up enjoying being there simply because I was more focused on what I wanted as opposed to what was happening and not liking the things that were happening. But I never changed my perspective on my boss. She still remained the same. She just ended up treating me differently. That was a bigger one. But I've had multiple experiences like that where I made a declaration and I said, this is how it's going to be. And it turned around and ended up being like that. I made a declaration that I was going to write and sell 2 screenplays, 2 TV shows within 6 months. So I did that. I sat down and I wrote 2 screenplays within 6 months, and out of nowhere a pitch fest was created, and I got an email out of nowhere. I wasn't even subscribed to the service. I don't even know how I managed to get this email in my inbox telling me about this pitch fest. So I went to the pitch fest and I pitched my scripts and I practiced my pitches, and I ended up getting quite a lot of interest. I got a top-notch agent, and I had a production company was interested in both of my scripts, and I thought I was going to go somewhere. And then 6 months later, it all fell apart. Nobody did anything. They didn't sell. I didn't have any meetings. Nothing happened. So there's a meme here. It says, I don't fix problems. I fix my thinking. Then problems fix themselves. This is why a lot of people have a hard time understanding what's going on here, because the majority of people look at the world as a physical place and they try to fix it physically. You can't fix it physically. A lot of people will say, well, we would solve all the world's problems if we took all the evil people and got rid of them. Okay, so then doesn't that make you evil? So what constitutes evil? How are you going to draw the line? How are you going to label these people as evil? What are you going to do with them? Then what happens? Then you look at the end of the line of what you determine to be good, and there's still going to be more evil because it's all relative. That's why a lot of people will say, well, I just want things to go back to the way they were, but just without the evil. That's not going to change anything, and it's not going to happen. And what we had before is not good. The majority of people don't have any imagination. They just do as they're told, which makes them mostly NPCs. Because in order to create, you have to have imagination. So they will look at the world and say, well, let's just go back to the way things were, because they can't imagine a world that's any different. If you tell somebody who is really caught up in the matrix system, however you choose to interpret that, and you tell them, well, we need a world without money, they'll freak out. They can't fathom a world without money. They can't conceive of a world without money. How are we going to function if we don't have money? How are we going to know who has more? How are we going to prevent people from stealing? How does money prevent people from stealing? How are we going to know the different classes of people? How are you going to prevent people from being lazy? You're always going to have lazy people. Always. And what's wrong with being lazy? There's leisure, and I think we need more leisure. And then there's being lazy, and then there's being slovenly and sloth-like, where you just take up space and do absolutely nothing and absorb the energies of other people. Then you become a leech. But people are so far programmed into the ego mind that they cannot fathom any other mindset. And because this world is created out of the ego mindset, the ego consciousness, they can't fathom a world created out of heart consciousness. And so they think they have to fix it physically. It's like, no, you have to change your mindset. They don't understand how changing somebody's mindset is going to change anything. A lot of people in the world have absolutely zero self-awareness, have zero awareness of how what you think affects what you do, that what you think affects what you say, that what you think affects how you behave and how you interact with people and your relationships and your jobs and everything. A lot of people think they're just stuck. They're stuck where they are. They're stuck with their lot in life. And yeah, like I've said before, a lot of everything is scripted, but there's room to move within that. That's it for today's video. Hope you're having a great day. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye for now.